Thank you, Karen, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'm looking forward to really exploring how we can use a particular type of nonfiction book in early childhood classrooms. I think certainly it's been my experience that children take a lot away from these kinds of experiences, and they light kids up. Plus, I end up learning a lot. I challenge you to read a book aimed at 4 or 5 year olds that talks about worms that you don't learn something from. So hopefully we will get to experience just some of that thrill of discovery along the way. I think what I'd like to describe up front is that the books we're going to look at and the ways we're going to look at sharing them are ones that children can learn a great deal from in some ways that open up the world for them and support them as readers. I will make sure to reference how they are integral to education standards, maybe not used as much as it might be useful too. So we'll think about how to really go at those outcomes. And I think these books are super engaging for young kids that like I say, once again, I challenge you to use a book on worms with children in a classroom that just found a worm outside and have it be boring. Everybody will be intrigued. So to set you up, we're going to think some about what the sort of impact of using nonfiction is. We're going to look some at this particular type of nonfiction or genre that I'm going to call information text. And I'm going to take apart with you what's in there, like how these books work, so that we can be clear on what the opportunities are. And then I want to do some thinking with you about how we might utilize them in the classroom. I'll give a few sort of quick examples of authentic emergent uses of this kind of book. And then we'll also look at some really intentional planned use of information books in supporting children's comprehension and engagement in storybooks. So that's where we're headed. Oh, we'll also make a quick peek at the internet and how we can use the internet in some ways that support these as well. I'll mention that I expect that you've received 3 handouts. If you haven't, let Karen know, and you should have gotten them in your email from her. She's always good about sending those out. And for our purposes today, let me talk you through them really briefly. The first is just a two-pager, and you'll see it has a minimal amount of text and a lot of white space. This handout here is basically an outline of what we're going to do today. If you want the big ideas, they're all right here. And the white space is specifically so that if you want to jot notes, you have a place for that. Okay, so that's the one I think it's numbered 1 in your handout sequence. The second one is all the PowerPoint slides, so don't be concerned about whether you have those. You do. The only ones you don't are that I will be quickly going through some pages from a children's book, and I did not put those pages in the PowerPoint. But if you actually want those book pages, just look at the book. All right. So you have all those. And then the third item is something for after our discussion, and that is an article from, I'm remembering right, this is from Young Children, and it is about using information books by Nell Duke, who I would suggest is, I don't know if there's a queen or an empress or whatever it might be of information text in early childhood and early elementary. That would be Nell Duke. So I will freely share that much of what I'm offering with you is things that I've learned through her, and then, of course, my own experience. Which brings me to one more thing before we sort of jump in here, and that is the other place I've learned a lot is by observing and talking and listening to other educators, because you folks have a little bit of time in with children as well. So I want to invite your comments and questions as we go through this today. If there are experiences that come to mind and they take you towards some information that would be helpful for others, please feel free to put that in the chat or ask questions. There might be times where it's appropriate to offer a comment out loud even. I don't think you're permanently muted there. If you need to come off mute, you can. I'm gonna do a lot of talking at you. There's no way around that for this, but please notice your voice and experience and knowledge as well. All right. So I think that's everything for a quick background. I always try to give everybody just a moment when we get together to just pause and collect yourself after whatever you may be doing. I've scampered down to a spot that's not usually my workspace. And so, like settling in and all that kind of thing. Maybe you're still at work, or maybe you're at home helping kids or whatever that might be, but just give yourself a moment to settle in. And please, if you need to get up and get a cup of tea or whatever as we go along, please take care of yourself. We do better when we're noticing our bodies and our thoughts and taking care of those. So let's begin. I think the first thing I want to offer is just that this is actually the fourth in a series of webinars related to early literacy. We did a couple on related to children's learning of alphabet and the sounds of the language, phonological phonemic awareness. We did one on storybook reading. This is the second of three on reading books with children, each sort of aimed at a different kind of book, this one being information text. And we've got a couple more, one more coming up on reading and another coming up on writing, if those would be of interest to you. So let's take a moment and situate ourselves into reading so that we can place this information text into what goes on in our lives. I want you to think about from when you woke up right now, or woke up right now, if you were napping, from when you woke up this morning to right now, what are some of the things that you have read today? And, I've got a couple suggestions there. Maybe coming into the city, you were reading the freeway signs, making sure you got off at the right exit. Maybe you were in the shower and you needed to make sure you grabbed the shampoo rather than the conditioner, whatever that might be. So take a moment and just think about the things that you were reading and let's see what you got, okay? Emails, weather, television screen. Are you cold enough that you've had some closing? Street signs, coffee menu, professional development book, Facebook, emails, class dojo, weather, news. Kids had e-learning. All right, the temperature, right? I reviewed my daily schedule, CNN, emails, recipes. Hey, assignments, weather, doctor reports, lesson plans, dojo, all kinds of stuff here. Street signs, emails, children's books, food packages for gluten-free. That's our house too. Text, a story to my students. All right, class dojo, a graphic tee. All right, lakeshore orders. All right, so look at all this stuff. And I just invite you to first off, just notice the tremendous variety of all of the things that you've read, okay? But then the next thing I'd invite you to do is think about how much of what you read was nonfiction versus fiction, okay? Story time, that's fiction, right? But most of the rest of this is nonfiction text, right? Lakeshore orders, the doctor orders, hopefully the weather is not fiction, right? The lunch menu, most of what we read is factual information so that we can navigate our way through the day, okay? And I'm guessing that quite a bit of what you read was on the internet, but whether it's on the internet or whether it's books, so much of what we read is nonfiction text. So here on my slides, my wife's a knitter. There's a book that she has, Mastering Color Knitting. All right. We like to cook. I don't barbecue, but my nephew does, and Rodney Scott's World of Barbecue, right? Backyard bird guide. We watch the birds at the feeder. And then, I put up three different internet screens, all right? Up on the top right, anyone searching for personal care products, right? Skincare, click through and you'll get hundreds of links there. Hopefully the information there is nonfiction, right? Down on the bottom, we follow the news. There's the situation in the Ukraine. I don't know if anybody here is from Peoria, but if you are, that house on the bottom right, it's kind of funky, right? The site, to be clear, this is Zillow. I don't know if anybody else uses Zillow. We kind of fantasy do sometimes, right? So that house is $165,000, which like that's dirt cheap for a house now, right? 8 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. However, when you click through, there are only two pictures of the interior. So we don't know what's going on there, right? But this is what we do, right? We navigate nonfiction text. We go shopping at Target. Emily's got this house apparently is like right across the street from a park, So yeah, Amy, that's my guess too, is the rehab cost is 3 times the list price, right? But that's how we get through our day is we have shopping to do, we have fantasy house buying to do, we follow what's going on in the news, we watch our bird feeder, and for all of those, we use nonfiction text. So the skills of using nonfiction text well are crucial simply to getting through our day. I mean, I've kind of said all this, right? Okay. Nowadays, we shop for a car online, right? Tay-Tay's latest news is people are following for wedding plans, right? That's more nonfiction text. 96% of the internet is, I don't know, I don't know how they count some of the stuff that's out there because it seems like there's a lot of misinformation. I don't know if that counts as nonfiction or fiction, but in any case, most of what we read online is nonfiction text. So how do we get into that with young kids? Well, one way in is to use this very specific genre of nonfiction that gets called information text. Okay. I'm not going to talk about all of nonfiction. I'm going to talk with you about this sort of particular genre. All right. And what you'll find in these kinds of books is that, like the title says, they're full of information. Maybe about the natural world, a book about birds, or a book about turtles, or a book about Antarctica, or penguins, or whatever it might be, the natural world, right? Or animal homes. There can be all kinds of ways of getting into the natural world. Or the social world. There might be a book about clothes. There might be a book about people in another country. There might be a book about what it's like to live in an igloo. There's all sorts of different kinds of ways into the social world as well. These are usually written by somebody who knows a lot about the topic. It may be a children's book author who specializes in this, but then they go find out about a bunch about the topic. And then what they try to do is put that into a format that is accessible to children, accessible to us. You have a book about, where's my book about ants? Got a book about ants, and you get in here and it'll show like, here's how ants live together in a colony, and that's what they're called when they're together. Talks about the queen ant, right? Talks about the ant eggs, the pupas, talks about how the workers take care of it sort of goes through what are the things you'd want to know about ants? How do ants talk to each other? Okay, so all kinds of information about whatever the topic happens to be. And they do it in this using these kinds of tools that we will never or almost never see in a storybook. Okay, they will have headings, they will have maps, they will have diagrams, they will have graphics, they will have glossaries and indexes and tables of contents, all kinds of things that children will use later in upper elementary, junior high, high school, but that we can help them know how to navigate, even just have as a second language as young kids. So they've got these features, and we're going to look at those. And they're, like I say, they're a particular type of nonfiction. Okay. So here are some examples. All right. And I'm not going to, you've already seen busy ants. Let's see. Here's bears in their dens. And, there's table of contents. Oh, if we want to find out about dens, we can go to the section on dens, and we see that some bears live inside trees for the winter and for their den. Some polar bears dig in the snow to make a den. Some just dig a little bit into the ground, so on and so forth. Okay, so find out about bears, dump trucks. What do you want to know about dump trucks? How do you load a dump truck? How does the dirt get into that dump truck? How do they do the dumping? Okay, now that may not be as exciting for you and me as it is for some 4 or 5 year olds, but it is for some 4 and 5 year olds, right? Especially if there's a dump truck across the street. And scuba divers, how do you breathe underwater? Goodness. Okay? And birds, there's probably birds outside your classroom window. So lots of different examples of things that are either areas that kids can be curious about, like bears, but that maybe you don't have any bears in your neighborhood, or things that you directly may have in your neighborhood. There are probably ants out there somewhere on the playground, right? So when kids get curious about them, let's get out busy ants. Just to make the contrast clear, as I say, this is not all types of nonfiction. And here are at least three others that are commonly seen although not that commonly in early childhood or kindergarten. One is biographies. There's a biography of the Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. I have to confess, I've always kind of liked biographies, and I have yet to find a way to use those in a really engaging way with this age range of 3, 4, 5 year olds. But that is a genre out there. Anybody have some hints on that? How to use them well? Let me know. We're not doing that today. Another is what you would say I would call procedural books, like how to, right? And the most common how to probably recipe books, right? But there's how-tos on all sorts of stuff, all right? And what you do if you're with a recipe book is, oh, we want to make cookies. I think I'll go back here to the index. Cookies. Oh, what kind should we look up? Peanut butter cookies, chocolate chip cookies. Oh, chocolate chip cookies? Okay. Page 184. Let's go look. And so we can find out how to make chocolate chip cookies. Oh, wow, look at this. Nelsie uses Sonia's books during Women's History Month in kindergarten. All right, so I just need to get a year older. All right, and Darcy, that seems like a really powerful way to get into biographies, is by writing our own, so the kids have a sense of how that works. Thank you for that. Laura's question, when you say informational texts are preliminary resources for comprehension skills that students will use as they progress in higher elementary. I think that's, so let me think about this. I want to answer yes, that is certainly a key aspect. I'm pausing to think about whether that's the only way I'd say they get used, but I would say yes, that these build comprehension skills for use in higher elementary and high school in probably three ways, and we'll get into this, okay? One is that they expose children to background knowledge in areas of that they might not know anything about, and when we build background knowledge, children are better at comprehending. Another is that they help children figure out how some of these books work, okay? If they're exposed to maps when they're 5, it's a lot easier to make sense of maps when you're 10, okay? And let's see, there was something else. Lost it. In any case, I think what you're saying there makes good sense. Okay. And thank you for that, Amy. All right. I'm going to stay focused on our information text, and now I feel like I have a lot to learn about how to use some other types of texts. So, why use these particular genres? In some ways, this ties into the on-ramp question, okay? That the research on using information text is that it does at least three things, and I'm going to suggest a fourth, okay? Those three things are, one is these are super for building vocabulary. We'll jump into that. The second is that they're really powerful for building background knowledge, and we will jump into that, okay? And the third is children tend to like them, right? And there may well be some child in your classroom who will not sit still for you reading them Stregonona, or even maybe even Pete the Cat, but who will be riveted if you get out a book about sharks. Okay, so these engage some children that might not be engaged otherwise. And the most fundamental reading skill is to want to read. Reading is way too hard to learn to do if you don't want to do it. So let's get into each of those. Vocabulary. So two things to know about the vocabulary, okay? One is that there tends to be lots of vocabulary in these books. There are words that like when we talk about density, every page practically has some word that's new for children. And look what happens in this example here. This is really quite common, actually, and we're going to see it again in another one, is that oftentimes that vocabulary is explicitly explained right in the text. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Turtles. So we saw a turtle outside, or we have a turtle in our classroom, or we were just talking about him, or reading a book about turtles. What do turtles eat? Turtles eat plants and small animals like worms. Turtles are omnivores. What an omnivore is. Oh, and there's the next line. Omnivores are animals that eat both plants and animals. So let's think about that. They would eat plants like we eat plants, don't we? We eat corn, we eat lettuce. Oh, we eat apples. Yeah, we eat plants. Do we eat animals? How about chicken? We do. Oh, beef, that's from cows. I wonder if we're omnivores too. Wow, omnivores eat plants and animals. In any case, what I want you to see there is there's a word that is unlikely to show up in Pete the Cat, omnivore, right? And you're given very explicit information about what it means. Here's another example from a lovely book, Baby Whales Drink Milk, from a series that I'll tell you about in a bit. Here's a text from that. Humpback whales have two breathing holes at the tops of their heads. So humpback whales don't have noses down there. They have holes at the top of their heads that they breathe through. They are called blowholes. The whales breathe through these holes the way we breathe through our nose. So whales don't breathe through their nose. They have a blowhole on top. Oh, no, they have two blowholes on top. And they breathe through those. Okay, so I don't know what's going on. It's right there in the text. Okay. Another sort of piece about the vocabulary that's often helpful for us, let's see here, is that many of these books also have glossaries in the back. Let's see. Oh, words to know. Okay. Cocoon, fertilize, invertebrate, regenerate. Woo! Okay. From earthworms, underground burrowers. Well, regenerate sounds like about a $5 word until you learn that what it means is they can grow it again. So if an earthworm had a finger and the finger fell off, it would regenerate. It would grow again. Wouldn't that be handy? So dense with vocabulary. Let's think a little bit about background knowledge. So think of the kids in your classroom, right? Think of all the children that you're working with, all right? And let's say you're reading a book, a storybook, okay? I actually have one in mind as I'm thinking about it. It's called Oonga Boonga, and it's a story about a baby who keeps crying and is fussy and crying, and nobody can get the baby to stop crying. Mom and dad try, grandma tries, all these people try to get the baby to stop crying. Now, the children in your classroom who have a younger sibling, do they understand that book? Darn right they do, right? Because they have lived experience with babies crying. They know what it's like to try to deal with the fussy baby, all right? So they are scaffolded into understanding that story. Now, let's say you're reading a story about the ocean, maybe even one with dolphins as characters. There are some, all right? Anybody know where that picture on the bottom right is from? Some of you folks do. Yeah, it's from the shed. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So some of the children in your classroom have been to the shed, haven't they? Right? And when you read a book about the ocean or a book about dolphins, all of that background knowledge is right there, ready to be used. Okay. So they can make sense. Yeah, it's the oceanarium, isn't it? Yeah. So if you're reading a book that's related to the ocean or dolphins or whatever, they have background knowledge to help them understand it. Okay. Now, has every child in your class gone to the shed? Kids down in Peoria, or I forget what town is way down at the southern end of the state. Oh, Cairo. Isn't that the way down south? I think. Okay. Has everybody been to the shed? No, not even all the kids in Chicago, right? So is everybody carrying that background knowledge when you read that book about dolphins? No. Up on the top right there, armor, there's probably some child in some classroom that's represented here whose family has gone to the Art Institute and gone into the arms and armor wing and seen actual armor, right? And when you read a book about knights and dragons or whatever that would be, they are thinking of that equipment, right? But it's not most of the kids. So, what happens when children are placed in the situation of understanding a story that requires some background knowledge that they don't have? Well, let's find out. Take them up. Here's the sort of big research answer on that. Okay. The research is really clear that when you know something about a topic, it's easier to learn more about that topic, okay? Because you've got some framework for understanding it. When I read a book about a children's book about weaving, abuela, okay, and I know something about weaving, that story makes a little more sense for me than for the child who doesn't. All right. And so, like the key phrase there is the more you know, the better your comprehension tends to be. And let's be clear about what happens in reading is early on, kids have to figure out how letters and sounds work. That's the hardest thing. But come fourth, fifth grade, hopefully that's all settled. And now what matters is comprehension, which is about vocabulary, background knowledge, sentence structure, and so on. Okay, so let's see if we can do a little bit of playing around with that. Here's a newspaper article. I'll read it out loud to you, and then we can have a quiz afterwards, all right? Chennai beats Bangalore by 92 runs in IPL cricket match. Port Elizabeth, South Africa. Matthew Hayden hit 65 off 35 balls, and man of the match, Mattia Muralitharan, claimed 311 on Monday to lead the Chennai Super Kings to a 92-run victory over Bangalore Royal Challengers in the Indian Premier League. Set a daunting target of 180, Bangalore slumped to 87. All out after Hayden's aggressive stroke play, which included 9 fours and 2 sixes, put Chennai in charge. Everyone expects Matty to score straight, but when all of a sudden he starts to score through the leg side and fine leg, he becomes difficult to contain, said Chennai captain Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who also praised Muralitharan. It's great to have a bowler like him in the side, Dhoni added. When the pitch is helping, he's a bowler who can take you through. Now, is there any vocabulary words in there that you don't know a meaning of? There are no words you don't know in there, are there? Okay. If I gave you a comprehension test on this right now? Tammy's already lost interest, right? Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, actually, it's interesting because it uses the word bowler, and you think you know what a bowler is. We have a meaning for bowler. It's not the same one, is it? Virginia, it's like a foreign language. Lots of words you have no clue. There aren't any words there that you don't have some kind of idea of meaning of, I don't think. Like, you know, you know what a four is. You know what a leg is. Now, I don't know what a leg side is, do I? It's because it's colloquial to this setting, all right? Anybody here play cricket? It's crickets. I guess not. Okay, so no, and so we can't make sense of this, right? So yeah, my wife and I were in an Indian restaurant, and they had the cricket match up on the wall, and we tried to get them to. They tried to explain it to us. I don't have it, right? But oh, and okay, and here's someone who follows cricket at home, and so yes, those of you who watch cricket, follow cricket, you can make sense of this, right? For some of you, I could have done the same thing with baseball. For others of you, I could have done it with football or hockey. It's our lived experience. It's our background knowledge, right? So it's, yeah, Laura, you saw me trying to pronounce a name that I didn't know and hadn't practiced. So if you follow cricket, this makes sense to you. And if you don't, then you're stuck. And so one of the what can information text do here? It can help build the vocabulary and background knowledge that helps children make sense of settings that maybe they have some connection to, or maybe they don't. Okay. Here's a couple. Kelly, thank you for that. It was not interesting due to me not understanding. So, like, that would be worth putting in huge letters above our reading circle, right? It was not interesting due to me not understanding. And that's the child who's rolling around in the back of over at the edge of the circle and grabbing the blocks off the shelf and poking the kid next to them, right? It's not interesting because they don't understand it. And so one of the things that we can use information text for is to build knowledge so that kids can understand things in other settings. So here's a couple examples that might just be used emergently in a classroom, right? So, or just because kids are interested. There are some kids that are just interested in big work machines. So you might get a book on dump trucks, right? Or you might have a building site right across the road, or their school bus might go past it, or whatever that might be. So, this is from the book. Where is it? This is from the book Dump Trucks. The beds of dump trucks tip up. Loads of dirt and rocks tumble to the ground. Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? So I sleep in a bed at home, but this isn't that kind of bed. This part here, where they put the dirt in, they call that the bed. Huh. It's not a bed for sleeping. It's a bed for dirt and rocks. And right here, look what it says. Bed, right next to it. So we learn a new idea about bed. We can play with the word tip. We learned something about how beds work, or how dump trucks work. Or if we're talking about ants, maybe we've been talking about ants because there were ants in the classroom or ants outside or whatever that might be. In the book Busy Ants, these ants are greeting each other by touching antennae. Greeting is like saying hello, right? So if I meet somebody new, I can just say hi and I might wave, right? Or I can say hi and sometimes we shake hands. Elise, can I shake hands with you? Yeah, we're greeting each other, aren't we? Yeah, so Elise and I are greeting each other by shaking hands. Sometimes people greet each other by hugging each other. Yeah. Does anybody have a dog? Oh, yeah, Andre, you have a dog. What does your dog do when it sees another dog? Oh, it sniffs noses. Yeah, that's how. Oh, and they sniff butts too, don't they? Yeah, that's how dogs greet each other, isn't it? That's not what ants do. Ants take their antennae and they touch each other's antennae. I guess there's lots of ways to greet each other. Okay, so lots we can explore on building vocabulary and background knowledge. did a little cultural anthropology there on people and ants and dogs. Now, let's make a connection with standards, okay, in reading theory, all right? And those of you who've been in some of these sessions before, you've seen this diagram before. If not, I'm going to make really quick work of this here. The idea here is like, what are the skills that go into learning to read, right? And some of them up in the blue circle there are ones about essentially decoding. Children need to learn letters and sounds. They need to be able to put those together to go bed, right? Okay. They need to be able to do that. Okay. And then down in the red circle, children need to be able to make sense of the language that they're hearing. And whether that's the vocabulary words, whether that's the background knowledge, whatever that might be. And what we've talked about right now is between the vocabulary and the background knowledge, we're really leaning hard on building the skills that are in that red. It's not a circle, is it? That's an oval. Use vocabulary correctly, right? Okay. So this is an essential part of building reading skill. In the Illinois standards, this would count as oracy, this would count as comprehension, this would count as vocabulary, okay? All of that, we're building all of those. And if you look at the college and career anchor standards, read and comprehend complex literary and informational texts independently and proficiently. Now, we're a long way from independently and proficiently, but you always start everything with scaffolding, right? And there are preschool and elementary and high school standards all over the place on this. I won't spend a lot of time on this except to say that this is what goal 3 is about in the Illinois ELDS. Demonstrate interest in and understanding of informational text. And then the learning standards related to that of recognizing details. And notice, recognize features of nonfiction books. What are features? And what's that about? Well, what features are about is things like having a table of contents and being able to use that. Things like having a map and being able to use that, and so on and so forth. And of course, to be able to recognize features of nonfiction books, we have to use books with those features, right? And that is that sort of piece that was mentioned earlier about this sort of building the skills that lead to later skills. Kindergarten, key details about text, the key details standards, the craft and structure standards, the integration of knowledge and ideas standards. And then what I want to just highlight here is the big picture is starting in 2009, the education standards that sort of are guiding some of the country and that the National Assessment of Education Progress measures shows what happens with fiction and nonfiction over the course of children's school careers. And that in 4th grade, the national assessments will assess about 50% on literary story kinds of books and 50% on informational books. By grade 12, reading fiction is about 30% of what kids get assessed on for reading, and reading nonfiction informational books is about 70%. So as much as we love to read those stories with children, if we're sort of looking to building the skills, this is crucial. And it's fun. So I want to just give you a moment to think about those times when maybe you have shared some information text with kids, and if you have any thoughts about what you've noticed about how children have responded, okay? Kelly says, my students loved roly-polies when we went outside, so I got a book about roly-polies, and they loved it. They were super engaged and wanted to learn more. It's always nice it is always nice when they have an interest first. Yeah, and I want to add a word in there. It's always nice and powerful when they have an interest first, and when you follow that interest, right? Because you did, at least a couple of things there is one is you took an area that they were engaged in and built on it and built background knowledge. And a second was that you just helped them go, hey, when I want to learn about the world, I can do it, All right. Chick study. All right. Really liked it and we're interested. Butterflies, pumpkins, penguins. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm guessing you did not have classroom encounters with a penguin, but they seem to be something that kids just kind of delight in and intrigued by, right? So, polar bears in the Arctic. Yeah. Amplify science units and the interest is high. Absolutely. Yeah. Videos will go the same way, won't they? Yes. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah. All right. So, this is engaging for children, and I, I want to avoid stereotype, but I do want to highlight that these books do tend to engage some children that may not be as engaged, but with stories. And that's an awesome way to roll. Samantha did this as pre-reading before going to the field. Oh, yeah. Um, uh, Kenya, more interested in regular stories, anything with animals. Kids, animals, dinosaurs. Yeah, the weather. All right. So, I mean, here's the conclusion. I've got it in a slide. You've essentially said it, right? This can be highly motivating for children. I want to note that some of what can be kind of engaging for children is that we use it in some different ways. Okay. So, if I had Brown Bear here, which I don't, or if I had Pete the Cat, I would start at the beginning. We'd read the cover of the book. We'd, read the page one, two, three, four. We'd read every page, right? All the way through. There's a story there. Okay. If I am talking with the kids about, well, actually, we probably shouldn't make chocolate chip cookies by nutrition standards, right? But okay, if we were talking about making chocolate chip cookies, I would not start this book at the beginning and read all 184 pages until we got to the chocolate chip cookie recipe, right? I would say, oh, chocolate chip cookies. Okay? Let's find something healthier. Tortilla chips. We like tortilla chips, don't we? We could make our own tortilla chips. That rocks. Page 56. I'm going there. Let's see. Oh, there's page 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. Tortilla snack chips. Do those look tasty? Let's find out how to make them. Right? So we use these in a very different way from how we read a story. And that is, sort of, it's its own lesson in part, and it's engaging for some kids. And so that brings us back to this same diagram, except this time I want you to notice the green circle, okay, where it says active self-regulation. For children to be successful readers in the long term, they have to give full attention to the task of reading. And this is part of what brings them. Good enough. All right, so now let's get into how these books work and how we can read them. And as I've said, fiction books are organized story, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We don't do recipes that way, right? Nonfiction books not only are not read linearly, they have all kinds of, well, the standards call them features. So let's look at those. Right? We've talked about that. And here's sort of a list of those. Let's get into the details. They have tables of contents. So when we saw the rabbit out over on the other side of the fence, I remember Alicia was asking, wonder where it lives. Can we find its house? And we didn't know where rabbits live, do we? We thought they don't live in apartments. We know that, right? Because, oh yeah, Omar's in an apartment building and there aren't any rabbits in your apartment building, are there, Omar? No. So, got this book called Rabbits. And I want to show you something about it. Right at the start of this book, there's this page here called the contents, and it tells us everything that's in the book. And one of the chapters is called Where Do Rabbits Live? Should we look at that? Let's go. And so we just used the table of contents to figure out a question of real interest to the kids, right? diagrams, same kind of thing. So we know when we go to the firefighters to visit the firehouse next week, we are wanting to know all about what's on their fire truck, right? And so let's see if we can see some of the things that we thought were on there, or maybe if there are even some other things that might be on that fire truck. And I have this book about firefighters, and let me see where, look, I have to find the right page. I'll look at the table of contents. How do firefighters put out fires? They use their fire trucks. Let me go there. Here we are. Here's that picture of the fire truck. Let's see what we see. Yes. Okay, thank you. Fatuma told us that there were ladders, and there's a ladder right on top. Oh, and then we can go through and look at some of the other parts, and then we could go see what we find at the fire station, right? So there are diagrams. There are maps, right? So we were wondering if turtles might live near us. Here's a map. And we live in Illinois. Let me show you where Illinois is on this map. Hmm. If if turtles live in that spot, then there will be red lines on it. Okay. So right there's Illinois. Do you see any red lines? You do. That means there are turtles that live in Illinois, right where we are living. So we can look for them, right? And then the index, same kinds of things. So we were wondering what we could put in the bakery area of our supermarket. I'll go look in this book on supermarkets and see if it says anything about bakeries. Oh, bakery, page 14. I looked in the index, it says bakery, page 14. I will go to page 14. There's page 12, 13, 14, bakery. Let's see what it says. The bakery has cakes. Do we have any cakes? We don't have any cakes? Miss Mariah, would you write down cakes for us so we remember to put cakes in our bakery? Breads? Do we have breads in our bakery? Oh, thank you, Fatuma. Yes, we do. And cookies. Okay, we have cookies, I remember, because Jamal, you fed me cookies, didn't you? And it says bakery workers frost cakes. I think that's what this person is doing. We're going to have to find out more about that and see if we can do frosting cakes in our bakery. So using the index in order to get at information that's useful for whatever we're doing. And I've actually just given you a whole bunch of examples of how we use information text, right? We can explore areas of interest, use it in authentic ways, and then the other place we need to get is how we use it in particular information books. I actually kind of did the little firefighter piece here, so I think I'll let that one go. Worms. So out on the playground, after it rained yesterday, we found all those worms. And I remember, let's see, oh, Fatuma put some in a cup, and Isaiah put some in a cup, and Alicia put some in a cup. And then do you remember where we put them? Yeah, they're over there in the dirt. Yeah, they're in our little bucket in the dirt. They must be hiding in there because we can't see them. But we were worried about whether they have food, don't they? Weren't we? Yeah. And we were trying to figure out what we could feed them. So I brought this book, Earthworms, and let's see if it says anything about what earthworms might eat. I'll take a look. So I'm going to go to the table of contents because we know that that tells us what's in a book. So here's the table of contents. Let's see some of what's in here. It says young earthworms. Oh, that might be interesting to find out about baby earthworms, but that's not what we're looking for right now, is it? Earthworm enemies? Oh, earthworms have enemies? Well, we better read that so that there aren't any enemies of them in our classroom, right? But that's not what we're looking for. Let me keep looking here. What do earthworms eat? Page 11. Okay, let's go take a look. Page 7. 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, here we are. Oh, look, there's a picture. There's an earthworm. I think it has something in its mouth. Can you tell what that is? You think it's a leaf? You think it's a leaf too? It's a leaf too. Does that look like a leaf? They must eat leaves. Okay, we can get leaves, can't we? Let me take a look and let's see what it says over in the text here too. It says, what do earthworms eat? Earthworms eat rotting plants and vegetables. Rotting is like after they've died and they're starting to get kind of mushy. Rotting plants and vegetables. Hmm. Well, we know we can give them leaves. That would be plants. How about vegetables? What are vegetables? You remember carrots are vegetables, aren't they? And lettuce? Can we give carrots and lettuce to our worm? Spinach too, for sure. Oh, you know what else it says? They also eat the remains of animals. Remains are like after an animal dies, then a worm might eat it. So we find another dead bird, we could feed it to the worms. Okay, there we go. So another example. I've given an example with the supermarket book, but here's another one. So we are setting up a grocery center. We're wondering what departments we should have. What departments should we have in our grocery store? Let's take a look at our supermarket book and see what departments they talk about. Oh, supermarket, that's page 4. Departments, page 10. Let's go see. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 departments. The produce department is large. Okay, so we can read about the produce department, then we can read about the deli, then we can read about the bakery, and so on and so forth. So then we can design our grocery center. So let's pause for a moment and let me just invite you to notice what went on in this last little bit here. What stood out for you? Were there some things that seem effective? Were there some things that connect with what you do? Maybe there are questions that come up. Kelly, we do a unit on worms. There are a lot of good nonfiction books on worms, aren't there? And you make a worm farm. Great. Oh, excellent. And adding veggies to it. There they go. All right. Connecting to real life experiences. All right. Yes. Build background knowledge about a child's world. So like you can find worms and not know what they eat, right? Yeah. April, kids love worms. Well, some kids don't like to put them in their hands, right? But that's a whole thing on its own, right? Talking. Oh, Zoe, thank you for noticing that. Talking the students through your thought process. Because what I could have done was just gotten out this earthworm book and said, I got this book about earthworms, and it says, right, oops, it says the earthworms eat and read it. But instead, what I tried to do was to take them right to the table of contents and, in effect, take my thinking and hold it out there where they can see it, right? Because it's actually not that hard to understand what a table of contents does. And if you model this 10 or 12 times, that like the table of contents is where you go if you want to know what's in the book, right? And there's no reason kids can't leave preschool and kindergarten knowing, I mean, they won't be able to read anything in the table of contents, but aren't they gonna don't don't we all want to know what earthworm enemies are now too, right? So unpacking for them how we use the structures of the book in order to gain knowledge, right? And even like back on that, I didn't do a great job on this. If I'd been holding the book, maybe better. But back on this map on the right-hand side here, even explaining how the red lines mean that that's where turtles live. And, I could have actually talked kids through what a key is, but, didn't on this one. But that's, you know, they can learn how these structures work. Yeah. Yeah, okay. New terms along with photos, labels. Yeah, all right. Reading of the parts of the book out of order and just, yeah, we do not have to read every book beginning to end, right? We can use it in the same way you or I would actually use it, right? Which is, here's the information I'm interested in, so I go right there. Now, we all know how this works. We go down rabbit holes, and if you see something on earthworm enemies, we are absolutely reading up on earthworm enemies, but that's more that's like getting in, that's like what happens online, right? It's like, oh, let's follow the link, right? But we have this thing we're going in for, right? Okay. Vocabulary, critical thinking skills, formative assessment. Oh, interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Reading skill of searching for certain words. Okay. Oh, Joy, I appreciate it, like the little math bonus there, right? I tried to be intentional about just both, there's an 11 or whatever it is, and then saying the numbers. There's no reason not to, right? Because it's what I'm doing, just making our thinking visible out loud. Yeah. Um, Emily, tying it to the Dramatic Play Center, my thought there is that when children have background knowledge, they can help us design our classroom, right? So let's share it with them. All right. I think we've been here. Now, here's the sort of other big piece I want to do with you is I want to think with you about what can we do to support children in making sense of contexts that they may know very little about. Up till now, we've been doing things that connect. Um, Many of them actually connect fairly well with their world, firefighters, earthworms, cooking, whatever that is. And even with something like penguins, the book is designed to help children make sense of it, right? Okay, if you're reading a book for 5-year-olds on penguins, it starts with a penguin is a bird, but it's a funny kind of bird. It doesn't fly, it swims, or something like that. I should write children's info text. I don't know. Anyway, it helps kids make sense of it. What happens in a lot of storybooks is that there's background knowledge in the story that's helpful to have that the story doesn't necessarily supply for you. Okay. And it's often about the setting of the story. Okay. So, those of you who use creative curriculum, which I'm guessing is probably a lot of folks, there are any number of books in that curriculum that are set in settings that children in Illinois might not know anything about. And I have one here, The Three Little Javelinas. Okay. It's set in the desert Southwest. Now, I once had the opportunity of working with some folks in a school in Yuma, Arizona, okay, down in actually southwestern Arizona, okay, and I did not have to explain javelinas to them. I did not have to explain cactus to them. I didn't have to explain saguaro cactus to them. Okay, they lived that. Okay, however, when that teacher read The Snowy Day, the old Ezra Jack Keats book, The Snowy Day, she had to explain snow to her kids because they'd never experienced it. Okay. So it depends on your context. And of course, sometimes we don't want to read those books because the background knowledge can be a heavy lift. But the other way in, or another way in, is to use some information text to build some of that background knowledge. So here's what I want to do with you. Hattie, it was a good day to read The Snowy Day, wasn't it? Yeah. Cold in Chicago and across Illinois, isn't it? Cold here in Minnesota, too. Um, I want to share this book with you, The Three Little Javelinas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first page, all of the first page, and then I'm going to summarize the next several pages so that we can just get a sense of what goes on in this book. And as I'm doing that, I want you to think about what are the events in this book that would not make sense to the children in your class. Okay. Those of you on the Zoom from Yuma, Arizona, you're great. Okay. Those of you in Peoria and Galesburg and whatnot, we've got some work to do, right? So be sort of listening for and making, thinking about what would the kids in my classroom not understand. I'm going to read it straight. I'm not going to do any sort of scaffolding, explanations, vocabulary support, any of that. I'm just going to give you the text. All right. So just be thinking about what might they be missing. And then we're going to need to think some about how we might fill it in. All right. So once upon a time, way out in the desert, there were three little javelinas. Javelinas are wild, hairy, southwestern cousins of pigs. Their heads were hairy, their backs were hairy, and their bony legs, all the way down to their hard little hooves, were very hairy. But their snouts were soft and pink. One day, three little javelinas trotted away to seek their fortunes. In this hot, dry land, the sky was almost always blue. Steep purple mountains looked down on the desert where the cactus forest grew. Soon the little javelinas came to a spot where the path divided. Each one went a different way. So just pause here in case you haven't read this story before. This is in effect a retelling of the Three Little Pigs, right? And the first little pig is going along, wandering along, and gets caught up in a dust storm. Gets the whirlwind blows them away and ends up in a heap of tumbleweed and decides to build his house out of tumbleweed. Coyote comes along, blows that tumbleweed house over, no problem. First little javelina runs away. Second javelina walks across the walks through the saguaros, uses the word saguaros for that type of cactus, and comes across a woman who is gathering sticks from inside the dried up cactus. And she was using those saguaro ribs, that's what they referred to as saguaro ribs, to knock down the cactus fruit. And the second javelina asks, "Can I have some saguaro ribs to build a house?" And she says yes. He builds a house out of saguaro ribs. Coyote comes along, blows it down.
Everything closed.
So now we are got two javelinas on the run. The third little javelina finds a man who is making adobe bricks from mud and straw. And she asks, "Can I have some adobe bricks to build a house?" And he says, "Sí, yes." And she builds a nice house out of adobe bricks. And what happens there, of course, is that the coyote can't blow it down. Let's pause for a moment and think about what might children not know and what do they need to know to make any sense of this story. Just throw a few comments in the chat. What is tumbleweed? There's javelina, pigs, all kinds of vocabulary, right? Desert, fortune, cactus flowers, dust storm, tumbleweed, saguaros, adobe, right? I had to look up what adobe was, actually. I had an idea, right? And look at all those words there. Thank you, Jenny. Whirlwind, right? Tumbleweed, cactus. So lots of vocabulary. Okay. So much vocabulary that will be unknown, right? Snout, for sure. Javelinas, coyotes, adobe. So I want to highlight two things we've got going on here. One is there's just a whole ton of vocabulary. All right. And so some of that we can unpack in the story. Some of it we could pre-teach if we did it in a way that didn't feel like, oh my gosh, the teacher's pre-teaching vocabulary, right? We did it in an engaging kind of way. And then yeah, Kenya, a cactus forest. What the, yeah, a forest of cactus? Right. So actually, even we must have children in our classrooms who don't know what a cactus is, right? Let alone saguaro ribs. So now, let's think about the essential plot of the Three Little Pigs, right? The essential plot of the Three Little Pigs story is that the first pig makes a house out of something it's super easy to build a house out of, takes no effort, and it also can't stand up to anything, right? Gone. The second pig builds a house out of something somewhat sturdier, right? Sticks in the usual story, right? But still not strong enough. And the third pig builds a strong house, right? That the wolf or coyote cannot blow over. So in order to make sense of this story, I want to suggest that kids actually need to know a little bit about tumbleweed. Easy to blow over, right? Saguaro ribs, adobe, Okay. Otherwise, you don't get this idea that the coyote is having more and more challenge in trying to blow these houses over. So, how are we going to get at that? Excuse me. Well, we can use information text. There are a number of books about javelinas, right? So, and a decision for you to make is, do I want to do something with children? Oh, Nelsie, thank you. Yes. Looking for connections where you can make them. Some of our students will eat cactus, right? They may know it's cactus, they may not. They may know where it comes from, they may not. So looking for those places of connection. Because what happens in this story also is that that woman who gives the saguaro ribs, she eats cactus. All right. So we find some books on javelinas or the internet, right? Pull it up on the internet, same kind of thing. And you can decide about whether is this something that I can find an engaging way to pre-teach so that children will go into this story with the background knowledge, or is it something that I'm going to unpack afterwards? And you make your call on that, and we can think some about that. Here's one book about javelinas, and I might, if I was using this after the reading, I might go back and go, oh, I remember they saying those javelinas are hairy and all the places they're hairy. Let's see what we see. Oh, here's a javelina. And look at all that hair. It has hair all over its head and down on its legs. And do you remember they were talking about a snout? Look at this pink spot right there. Can you tell what that is? Do you see those two holes in it? That's their nose. And on a pig or on a javelina, we call that nose a snout. And let me tell you about something javelinas can do with their snout. That snout right there. They can go digging with it. Because, like, if they want to dig in the dirt to find something delicious to eat, do you think they have a shovel? No. Do they have hands to dig with? No, but they can dig with their snout. Or they can sniff with their snout. Okay, so, use one of these books and you might only use one picture. Or you might, here's a bunch more. And if you want to start exploring, oh, yep, thank you, Kelly Jo. Don't call me pig. Yes, they're not, they are not technically pigs, are they? Right. And then you can decide how much more you want to do with that. This particular book has pictures of javelina interacting with cactus, which is an interesting thing to add here. So these javelinas here, they are sleeping under a kind of cactus. And I want to hold this picture up right close to you. And I'm going to ask you to look and see if you can see those spiky parts on it. Or, oh, wait a minute. Look at this one here. Do you see those spiky parts on there? Cactus have lots of spiky parts like that, pokey, sharp, like needles to try to stop other creatures from eating them. But look at what that javelina is doing. And this javelina over here is too. It's eating that cactus. You can unpack. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah, we had a shout out for Don't Call Me Pig. And actually, I should just mention right now, I remember last time I had a webinar around this topic, people asked about book lists, and I want to note that at the end of this PowerPoint, there's, I think, about 4 or 5 different early childhood series, nonfiction information text series that are mentioned. And if you have questions about any of the particular titles, be in touch or talk to your neighboring teacher, as Kelly Jo highlights there. Don't call me pig. Let's see. Oh, let's talk a little bit about cacti. Saguaro. Let's see what we've got. All kinds of stuff. So I remember that second javelina book. I'll just turn back to the PowerPoint. I remember that second javelina asked that woman there for saguaro ribs and then built a house out of it. And I'm thinking these are the saguaro ribs right there, but I don't really know what they are. So I want to show you some pictures and maybe we can do some thinking about this together. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is like, what's a saguaro? And oops, I've got too many books going here, don't I? And do you see this right here? This really tall, skinny thing? That's called a saguaro. It kind of looks like a tree, but it's not a tree. It doesn't have leaves like a tree. Instead, what it has is it has lots of spiky parts there. See those? Yeah, those thorns or spines. Yeah. And they remember it said a cactus forest? Look at all those saguaros all over on that hill, just growing all over, kind of like trees. Well, so that's what saguaros are. They're those really tall, skinny cactuses. But it said that he had saguaro ribs. And you know what I found? Let me show you what I found. See if I can find the right book here. I'm juggling too many things. Excuse me. Be prepared when you're doing this stuff, right? Oh, here we are, everything. So here's a tall saguaro. That would be way taller than me. That would be as tall as our school. Look right next to it. Look at that brown thing right next to it. That is a dead saguaro. When they die, they turn brown like that, and they fall over like this. And it just looks like sticks. And you can take those sticks, and I guess if you're a javelina, maybe you would make a house out of it. But let me show you something other people do with it. Some people use those sticks, and can you see that this person has a stick here and this person has a stick? And look what she's doing. She's banging on that saguaro with her stick. Do you see some red things up on top? Mm, those are the tasty fruits. She's knocking those down. Look at what this child here has. Can you tell? He's eating some saguaro fruit. So, this was the picture I wanted for the saguaro for us. There we go. So prepare, because I was juggling three books there. Um, in any case, what I want to suggest there is simply that we can explain to kids what's going on. Now, I'll admit that, for me, I happen to know what saguaro ribs were because my middle child went to school in Arizona and I went and visited her and got to spend some time in the saguaro forests. But oftentimes I'm learning about this stuff, as many of us would be. All right, so we've unpacked saguaro. We could do the same kind of thing with adobe. Um, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to let that go. But here's where that ends up: is that when we explain to children, when children understand about what tumbleweed is, it just blows around. Saguaro ribs are kind of like sticks, and adobe, that's like bricks. Well, we can see why one house got blown down, a second one did, and the third one made it. Okay, so there's our adobe. So, any comments, questions, anything to say about just using? Let's think a little bit about using information text with um, with students as part of support for fiction. Nelsie highlights that combination of fiction and nonfiction offers differentiation in genre preferences. Yeah, so different children are going to have different um, preferences and engagement, and lots of ways in here. Okay. Yep. I think that something I want to highlight in that there is when you talk about windows of knowledge to travel through, I think, we talk about reading as being sort of like providing windows into worlds that children aren't familiar with. The challenge of that, of course, is that when we take them into worlds that are so unfamiliar that they can't make sense of them. And so, what can we do to help them unpack that, right? Kelly adds nonfiction books to her centers during a unit of study. That makes it more interesting for both kinds of children. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, let me give just a second here in case there's anything else someone to add. Text to text connections. Yes, indeed. Absolutely, yeah. And we could do that then comparing the straw of um the tumbleweed and the adobe and the bricks and so on. Absolutely. More repetition of new vocabulary. Yeah. Okay. Been helpful? Good. Um, Building background, yes. Possible use real world examples to if you've got a cactus, bring it in, right? Okay. Whatever you might be able to bring in as an actual physical specimen, absolutely. I don't. Well, actually, my daughter does have some house cactus. I could borrow from her, couldn't I? I once actually, when we were talking about um, um, the ocean, uh, uh, a friend had a wetsuit. He came in and put that wetsuit on, and oh my gosh, that was all anybody talked about for a week. So when you bring those things in, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, yeah. All right. Use nonfiction books to start small group time. Yeah, and I want to highlight with any of those, I didn't spend 20 minutes with any of those. Those are like 2 minute lessons, right? Okay. Um, I want to show you, this is kind of just another example of using information text to support stories, but it's sort of taking it to the next level and using information text to really do some exploring and thinking in some critical kinds of analytical kinds of ways that we wouldn't, at least I don't commonly encounter. And this was in Ms. Maddow's classroom. I got to partner with her on this lesson she was doing where she was reading The Gingerbread Boy, which, like, is that a hard lift for comprehension for kids? No. Okay. This is not a challenging, and, the background knowledge to just make their way through the book, first, this animal chases, then the cow chases, then the horse, whatever. Okay. It's not a heavy lift for kids. But she did this really interesting thing with the book. Afterwards, I think it was on the second reading, she asked, wonder why it's a fox that catches the gingerbread boy. Hmm, why couldn't the other animals catch the gingerbread boy? And then she went, so, like, do you think an elephant could have caught the gingerbread boy? Like, why did the fox do it? One of the kids said, oh, because foxes are fast. She said, yeah, they are. That's true. But I remember there was a horse in this story too. They're pretty fast, aren't they? Huh, wonder why it was a fox. So what Miss Maddow and I did was we went and got some books on foxes and shared with the children that foxes are predators. Predators are animals that catch other animals and eat them. You showed them these pictures of foxes catching other animals. Okay. Yeah. Laura, isn't that a great question? I thought that was brilliant. Okay. And let's see. Yeah. Okay. And now here's let's see if I can find them. Oh, did I not set up the pages? Oh, I guess I didn't set up the pages. So I'll just tell you about it. If you get the right books on foxes, and I'll flash three of them here. Goldie the fox is one. Here's one fox. I mean, if you go to any library, okay, your school library, okay, there are books on foxes, and you go through those books, and here's a picture of a fox eating a rat, and here's a picture of a fox catching a mouse, and here's a fox in the chickens, and it shouldn't be, and all these pictures of foxes being predators. Foxes are really good at catching other animals and eating them. That's really interesting. Wonder how they do it. Okay, well, I think it was in Goldie the Fox, or was it in Little one of the books? Looks like it was Little Foxes. There are all these pictures of the animals catching foxes, and then, oh, yeah, and you've got the standards here. This all links to standards. There's Goldie catching a bird. She's also eating berries and fruits, okay, but she's got a chicken, all right? And there's one with a muskrat. I did have some pictures. Great. Okay. So, we're using we can use these pictures for identifying, background knowledge and so on and so forth. But then here's the passage that like made it, all right? And I want you to notice that what I'm going to use here is actually the text that's to the side of the photos. I forget what that's called. It's like an information box. It's not a caption, I don't think, when it's on the side like that. But anyway, there's that picture of that fox, and it's up in the air. And here's what it says. When a fox spots a small rodent, like if a fox sees a mouse, maybe, okay, or a gingerbread boy, it flattens itself on the ground and then leaps up to catch the prey. The prey is the food it eats. Next, the fox seems to do a kind of dance, playing with it like a cat plays with a mouse. So it flattens itself and it leaps up and catches its prey. Well, do you think kids would like to flatten themselves and leap and pounce and capture their prey? Absolutely. Okay. So why was it the fox? Maybe it's because foxes are really good at catching prey, right? So I just, it's the places you can go by asking questions that information text can help you answer. I have to tell you, that was not only a learning experience for everyone, including me, right? That was so much fun. We leaped and pounced on the playground for weeks afterwards, right? Okay. Um, so let's just pause for a moment before we go any further. And if there's anything that you want to make a note about connections with your own use of information text or new ideas you might have, let me just give you a moment to think about that. Jot some notes for yourself if you'd like. So I've got sort of one last, I think if I'm remembering right, really one last piece for us to look at, but this is a really good place to pause. Okay. Yeah, Danielle, yes, foxes are clever. And we did not get at that, but you absolutely could unpack that, couldn't you? Right? For sure. Yeah. 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 Okay. Ooh. Oh, Tammy, wow. Yeah, that is an unsafe environment if you're a gingerbread, isn't it? Is that water? That's big trouble. All right. So let me just think a little bit with you about which books. Clearly, if you know you're going to be reading The Three Little Javelinas, then spend 20 minutes in the school library or down in your public library or whatever, pulling some books. And frankly, if you read that same book every year, I have discovered that nonfiction books like Little Foxes are really cheap on used book sites. The most common one is Abe Books. This, I think, was like $4, and it's a lot easier than going and finding it at the library every year. So you can, like, if you find one that you love, and if you got a little bit of petty cash, I know we don't have much these days, but if you have some, these are not expensive to acquire if you buy them used. Um, let's see. And then, just what books do you want to have in your room? Books on common topics. I always kept a book on like dinosaurs, a book on mammals, a book on birds. I mean, that worms, kids are going to be interested in ants, all those kinds of things. Books related to your theme, your storybooks. I hadn't thought to have a book on penguins, but I'll bet that penguins are a winner. That might be one to keep on a shelf, right? And the key thing here is what's going to be engaging for kids, and then what might support our theme or particular books, right? Books that make children's lives visible, nonfiction books. When I worked out on the Pine Ridge Reservation, a whole bunch of the families had parents go to the Line 3 Waters Protectors occupation. And, this was about like, there might have been their parents in that book. So, like, what are areas of nonfiction that apply to the lives of the children that you're working with? If you have somebody who in your classroom whose parents a mail carrier, then maybe a book about the mail or whatever, right? Those kinds of things that help kids see themselves and their families. All right, here's a couple series. This Day in the Life books. These are they are an easy go-to for all of those sort of community helper sorts of jobs that are things that come up in stories or that may be related to studies there's a whole, I don't remember how many of these books there are, but obviously everything from firefighter to zookeeper. Here's another series, the Mighty Machine series. There's a whole bunch of books about different mighty machines. If you've got kids who like machines, these are really simple text. These are really easy to read. I actually used a couple books as the Pull Ahead series. I showed you the Ants book. Oh no, I guess I didn't use, did I use I didn't, uh, well, Sturdy Turtles. I love Tumbling Earthworms. Okay, that's another great Earthworms book. Whoever, I forget who it was who was doing Earthworms. If you don't have one, that's one I like, right? If you don't have that book. Anyway, the Pull Ahead Animals series by Learner Publishing is a really, I learn a ton from these books, and they have all the kinds of things that you would hope would be in a nonfiction book. They have good information. They have glossaries. They don't have tables of contents, but other books will. The Animal Home series is also, I've shared briefly with you from Bears and Their Dens. This is a really nice, simple series with clear illustrations, good basic information, tables of contents, maps, that kind of thing. And then there are field guides for darn near everything, right? And National Geographic has a series, National Audubon. 100 years ago, when I was a kid, people used the golden guides. There's a number of those. And basically, all you need is something with a nice photo and a little bit of explanatory text. And kids will page through those, and you can talk about raccoons and different snakes. And, you put one in there with reptiles and amphibians, and some child is going to spend 20 minutes looking at different pictures of snakes. That's, because they have a snake at their house or they wish they had a snake, whatever that might be. Your library is great. Information text on the internet. Of course, the internet is information text for the most part. I want to highlight for you that there are some sources of information text. Well, there are some things geared at young kids that explicitly give shout outs to information text. And one of them is the series Molly of Denali. And I want to just give you, we're gonna take a minute to see a quick example of that. I think I'm gonna go, yeah, I think we got time for both of these. So I'm gonna, oops, pull this up. And I don't know if folks, that's the wrong one, sorry. I don't know if folks are familiar with Molly of Denali, but what happens over and over in this series is Molly gets in trouble or has a problem, and information text bails her out. Okay, so here we go.
Hello, Denali Trading Post. Hey, Tui, it's me, Molly. Are you busy?
So busy.
Really?
Kidding. How's the junk picking? At your secret place you won't tell me about?
Not good. We're totally swamped by mosquitoes. Can you look for a book called Survival Tricks of the North? Sure.
Got it. Whoa! This book is as big as a baby seal.
I know. That's what makes it so great. I bet there's a recipe in there for a mosquito repellent.
Yeah, but it'll take forever to find it.
Not if you use the table of contents.
Oh.
Shout out to the table of contents. Okay, and then the child uses the table of contents to get the information. Okay. Oops. Oh, let's see here. My favorite, though, is when you got moose trouble in your cabbage. Okay.
Look what that moose did. He ate there and there. Well, he didn't eat there, but I bet he licked it. Ugh, I'm gonna lose the cabbage contest. You know what we need? A pillow to cry in? The internet! Yours is better. So we type in what we want to search for, which is, there's this girl, me, and a cabbage named Big Green that I grew from a seed. And suddenly there's a moose who's barging in and stealing my glory. Let's start with keep moose out of garden.
You get the idea. Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. Sorry about that. Okay, so you get the idea. Malib Denali is all over information text. And so let me just take a second and pull this together. Here's where we've been. Info text is awesome for supporting early literacy skills. We can make authentic connections to activities and children's interest. We can use it to support stories. It's got all these great features that we can help children get familiar with and that help us make sense. And we can use it in just everyday kinds of ways with kids, along as with stories. So let me just give you a moment here for me to say thanks and to invite you to take a moment to just notice what's useful for you from our work today, what supports what you're already doing, what you might want to do in addition, and please be in touch if that's at all helpful. And thank you for your work with kids.